Diego Rivera's The History of Mexico, an epic of the Mexican people, is one of his masterpieces. The fresco mural tells more than 2,000 years of Mexican history, from Mesoamerica to the present. But there's an emphasis on the last 700 years of Mexican history. Commissioned by the Mexican government, the mural was painted from May 1929 and finished in November 1935. Here's the incredible preliminary sketches and the transformation to the masterpiece. The mural takes up 544 meters. It's divided into 3 large historical sections and painted on 3 separate walls within the awkward stairwell at the National Palace in Mexico City. With the left side of the mural painted on the south wall, the center is the north, and the west wall is the section farthest on the right. The entire north wall is called From the Conquest to 1930, covering about 400 years of Mexican history. And here's a closer look at the mural, emphasizing the double stairwell. Within these awkward confines, Diego painted over 2,000 years of history. And here's the masterpiece. From right to left, in mostly chronological order, ancient Mexico details the extraordinary cultures of Mesoamerica. The brutal Spanish conquest and colonization is next. Farther left is the Mexican reform movements. The center space is reserved for the history of Mexico's independence struggles from 1810 to 1821. The section to its left tells the story of the 1910 Mexican Revolution. French intervention is the next section. And the last section painted was Mexico, Today and Tomorrow. In the foreground, the Aztec-Spanish War. But it's worth noting that the title, The History of Mexico, was not the official title given by Diego Rivera, but it's a common title most people know the mural by. In fact, the only title actually given by Diego Rivera was for the far left section, Mexico, Today and Tomorrow. Here's a few more looks of the mural on the double stairwell. Now the section Ancient America was the first segment painted. It takes up more than 132 meters of wall space. Let's break it down. Quetzalcoatl sits center stage and is a symbol of wisdom in ancient Mexico for millennia, most notably in Teotihuacan, as a feathered serpent, and to the Mexica, better known as the Aztecs, he's called Quetzalcoatl. He's a Mesoamerican deity, which he was, and also the name of a ruler for nations like the Toltecs, which he also was. And Quetzalcoatl was also associated with the arts and sciences. He's portrayed here with light skin, a fancy quetzal feathered headdress with a conch on his chest, the symbol god of wind, Ejecat Quetzalcoatl, which he also was. He appears to be holding a Xiuhcuatl, the most potent weapon in the Aztec world. Teotihuacan's pyramids of the sun and the moon stand in the valley behind Quetzalcoatl. Teotihuacan was one of the largest and greatest urban centers in Mesoamerica, especially northern Mesoamerica, but its influence spread as far as Central America. The mural also appears to show the valley of Anahuac in central Mexico, where the Mexica ruled. In the top left, the head of the plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl, is erupting from the volcano, likely a reference when Quetzalcoatl immolated himself. The inverted sun represents the premonition of ancient Mexico's destructions, and yes, native sources suggest they knew of their eventual destruction. And there is Quetzalcoatl's departure. After being disgraced while drunk, he transformed into the star or planet Venus. The bottom right are fine cotton producers, and here a farmer is planting corn with the coa, a long-handled spade, which was extremely common. And remember, it was Mexican scientists that invented corn after cross-breeding wild grasses for generations. And here are Mexican artists, probably amantecat, or feathered workers. Feathers were one of the most revered precious elements in the ancient world. And here are Mexican stone sculptors and another artisan working on a pitcher for liquids. Right next to him is a tlacuilo, a scribe drawing a codex using a pictograph writing, which was prevalent in Mesoamerica. And yes, ancient Americans wrote books, libraries full of books. And here's a jeweler working with gold. Here's someone working on ceramics. And tamales were the principal method of moving heavy goods in Mesoamerica. In the top left are Mexica warriors. One of them appears to be an eagle warrior, one of the highest ranks in the Mexica army, a prisoner of war. And at the bottom is a dissident, denouncing powerful nations like the Mexica. It's an uprising, and the ensuing battle where local natives fight back. Now, Diego Rivera was fascinated with Mesoamerican history. He personally collected over 60,000 Mexican artifacts. And here's all the data for the first section, Ancient America. Let's continue with the foreground narrative entitled From the Conquest to 1930, painted from 1921 to 31 and taking up 288 meters. Here's the capitalist and conquistador and mass murderer Hernan Cortez, who led natives in arms against the Mexica, killing tens of thousands of non-combatants, and in one case, he forced native women and children to watch as thousands of people were killed in public under his order. He stands above a massive cannon, killing Mexicans, and just above are native Mexicans forced to tear down Mexican buildings in order to build Spanish ones. The Spanish horses worked like medieval tanks and slaughtered many native Mexicans. To the left, Vasco de Coriga was a missionary who helped natives, earning his nickname Tato Vasco. He also taught arts, trades, and was the first bishop of Michoacán. Fray Pedro de Gante was a Flemish Franciscan and one of the first missionaries who arrived in Mexico, where he spent nearly 50 years evangelizing native Mexicans. And here's a nun that specifically supported the catechizing of Mexican girls. Fray Bartolomé de las Casas was a theologian, a Spanish Dominican missionary, and a bishop of Chiapas. He is best known for protecting Native Americans in the Caribbean and Mexico, partly by speaking up and writing critically against the church in works such as The History of the Indies. Now, destroying native religion was paramount. As you can see, forced conversion was a key strategy, and in some cases, missionaries baptized as many as 40,000 people in one day. And although the conversion to Christianity wasn't thorough by any stretch of the imagination, Mexico eventually developed a syncretic or hybrid version of Christianity. In the center is the Mexican eagle holding the Atrachiloni, the Aztec sign for war, which is really just water and fire. The eagle probably represents their patron deity Huitzilopochtli, which rests on a nopal tree on top of a solar disk. And here is Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec leader, heading the defense of Tenochtitlan against the Spanish. And he's using a sling that can fire projectiles up to 149 miles per hour. And here is Cuitláhuac, brother of Moctezuma II, yes, that Moctezuma that you probably know as Montezuma. Now, he led the Noche Triste battle that kicked the Spanish out of Tenochtitlan, but later died of smallpox. And here's an Aztec priest holding up a sacrificial heart, by the way, which is the least common type of sacrifice in the Aztec world. And here's Hernan Cortez again, leading the Spanish siege of Tenochtitlan that killed tens of thousands of women and children. And here is a Tlaxcalteca warrior who was allied with the Spanish and thus holds a Spanish sword. And you can see the raging battle between the Aztecs and their allies, and the Spanish and their allies. Fray Bernardino de Sahagún destroyed many Mexican native codices, but also studied and wrote Mexican histories, most notably in Historia General de las Costas de Nueva España in 1540. Pedro Moya de Contreras was the first inquisitor, third archbishop and viceroy of Mexico. Juan de Mendoza was the archbishop and inquisitor with immense authority in Mexico under New Spain's Inquisition that tortured and killed many Mexicans. And here are Spaniards aided by Tlaxcalteca warriors, their most fervent and numerous ally. Here, Diego shows the rape of a native Mexican woman by conquistadors, sometimes taught in class as explorers. And here's Hernan Cortés for a third time, but this time with his concubine/translator, La Malinche. Cortés was actually legally married by the church at this time. His wife was back in Spain. And they're pictured with Martín, their mestizo son, who she never saw after Martín was birthed. She gave birth to him, and that was it. And here is Malancin, or Malinali, more commonly known as La Malinche, and baptized as Doña Marina. She was probably 18 or 19 years old, and she was actually part of a group of 20 girls giving to the Spanish as a gift. Although Cortés originally gave her to one of his captains, he took her back. Yes, she was an interpreter, but there are many examples where she acted on her own accord, essentially not just translating, but going out of her way to help the Spanish. And that's partly why, to this day, her name is synonymous with traitor, Malinchista. And for centuries, the Spanish invested lots of time and money in destroying Mexico's past. Here is Fray Juan de Zumarraga burning codices in Texcoco, and Fray Diego de Landa also burned many Mayan manuscripts, so much that only 13 codices painted before 1492 remain. The rest were destroyed. And here are unfortunate people tortured and killed by the Spanish Inquisition. Here's a friar burning Mexican books, or codices. Pedro de Alvarado was one of Cortés's most trusted lieutenants, and is seen here branding Mexicans on the face with a red-hot iron so they can be sold as slaves. And you can see the brand if you look closely. It's the G for guerra, prisoner of war, with some lines and dots. Alvarado also led the massacre during the Aztec festival of Toscat, killing hundreds of defenseless dancers and Mexican patrons. And Rivera paints native forces who are forced to destroy their own buildings and use the same stones to build Spanish buildings, which include the National Palace, the Metropolitan Cathedral in the Zócalo, Cortés's Palace, the Church at Tlatelolco, and many, many more. Now we've covered most of the foreground, so let's go to the top right of the section of the mural. On the top right is Nicolas Bravo, standing with his sword. He was a Mexican politician who served as interim president of Mexico on 2 occasions. And when the United States invaded Mexico, he was the general defending Chapultepec in Mexico City. He stands by military cadets defending Chapultepec from the U.S. invaders. And the eagle hovering is holding a symbol for war. The next section is reform. Near the top is Juan Alvarez, a Federalist and Republican leader who defeated the centralist government of Santa Anna and proclaimed the Ayutla Plan. He was also president from 1855 to 86. Jose Santos de Golada is to his right. He was a Mexican soldier and politician. He fought in support of the Benito Juárez government and was a member of Juárez's cabinet and Constitutional Congress of 1857. To his right is Luis Gingandi, who was an Italian soldier and Republican activist. In Mexico, he supported the Ayutla Plan. He also took part in the siege of Puebla in 1863. He was later captured and shot by imperialists. Manuel de la Barcena, who's just below, was born in Spain, but was rector of the Valladolid Seminary in Morelia and governor of the prelacy of Michoacán. He signed the Act of Independence in 1821. Miguel Miramon is to his right. He was a student of the Chapultepec Military Academy as a youth. Diego paints him brandishing a broken sword as a sign of betrayal for his support of the invading French on Mexican soil. He was executed by firing squad. Lazaro de la Garza y Ballesteros is to his right. First a priest, he became a bishop of Sonora in 1837. By 1850, he became the Archbishop of Mexico. But as a result of his attacks on the reform laws, he was exiled by President Juárez. Pelagio Antonio de la Basas y Dávalos was a priest, lawyer, and doctor. He was Archbishop of Mexico from 1863 to 1891. He was active with Maximilian, but expelled because of his differences with the French regarding the rights of the church in Mexico. Here is Antonio López de Santa Anna, the infamous president of Mexico, on 11 different occasions. That's right, 11. While president, Americans stole Texas from Mexico. Yes, the Alamo was in Mexico. Then the U.S. invaded Mexico on separate occasions, including the U.S.-Mexican War, which took 55% of Mexico's land. Santa Anna's constant intervening in politics eventually led to his exile. To his right is Pedro Espinoza, Bishop of Guadalajara, and the head of the Colegio de San Ildefonso. Archbishop Pelagio Antonio de la Bastia is next, known as a defender of the church's properties and privileges. In the top left is Melchor Ocampo, who was a liberal politician who was exiled due to his opposition of Santa Anna. In the U.S., he met Juárez and was later part of the 1857 Constituent Congress and became minister under Juárez. Ignacio Ramirez, the necromancer, had a thesis for the entrance into the Academy of San Juan de Latron, which was, God does not exist. Natural beings sustain themselves. His critical and questioning journalism earned him several prison sentences. He served as a magistrate of the Supreme Court of Justice until his death. Benito Juárez was the first indigenous president of Mexico. He led the 1857 Constitution and the reform laws that separated the church and state. And you can see men who, with picks and shovels, destroying churches, symbols of the importance of his mandate. The all-seeing eye is an allusion to the 33rd degree that Juárez attained as a Freemason. Ignacio Manuel Altamirano was a journalist, teacher, and labor politician. He was elected deputy to the Constitutional Congress, where he was a great orator. After the Republic was restored, he devoted himself to the arts and was renowned, holding public positions but living in poverty. Moving to the far left, José María Iglesias was a distinguished Mexican politician, jurist, and writer. During the Juárez administration, he was minister on 5 occasions, Justice, the Treasury, and Interior, and later served as president of the Supreme Court of Justice. In 1876, he also declared himself constitutional president. Just below, Bonsanio Arriaga was a liberal ideologist and reformer. Banished by Santa Anna in the United States, he met popular liberals, and after the Ayula Revolution, he came back to Mexico. He became a deputy in the Constitutional Congress and largely responsible for drafting the Mexican Constitution. Jose Maria Mata was head of civilian militias in Jalapa and fought against the U.S. invaders in Cerro Gordo and was sent to New Orleans as a prisoner of war. After he was freed, he fought against Santa Anna, who exiled him. After the Ayula Revolution, he joined Juárez and was elected deputy to the Constitutional Congress. He served as Ministry of Treasure under Juárez and years later as Minister of Relations under Porfirio Díaz. Ignacio Comonfort was a colonel with the Acapulco militias and elected deputy to Congress on several occasions. He was also interim president of Mexico from 1855 to 1857. He was elected again, but General Zuluaga rose up in arms against him, which led Comonfort to resign, and Benito Juárez, president of the Supreme Court, assumed the presidency. In 1863, Juárez named him general-in-chief of his forces in the struggle against the French. Valentin Gómez Farias studied medicine at the University of Guadalajara in 1807. but went into politics and in 1821 joined the Iguala Plan. He later approved the coronation of Agustin de Iturbide. He also acted as interim president on 5 occasions during the Santa Anna on and off reign. The next section is the independence of 1810. Looking at the top centered vines, Miguel Hidalgo increased the cultivation of vines, which had been reduced by repeated prohibitions by Spain in order to promote Spanish wine instead of Mexican. Hidalgo also established the silkworm in Mexico by planting 80 mulberry trees. Martín Cortés is to his right, is known as El Mestizo, the son of Hernán Cortés, and essentially enslaved concubine and translator Doña Marina, who's also known as La Malinche. He was born in Mexico, he was educated in Spain, and when he returned to Mexico, he allegedly took part in a conspiracy in 1565. He was tried under the Inquisition and was permanently exiled from the Americas.
Ignacio Allende was an officer in the Queen's Dragoons and a main conspirator in Valladolid in 1809 and 1810. He was a crucial part of the Mexican independence with Father Hidalgo.
He was an important organizer of the insurgent military and was appointed field marshal. But he was betrayed in Chihuahua, tried and executed for his part in Mexico's independence movement from Spain. After he was executed, his head was put on display at Alongada de Grandatitas in Guanajuato. Father Miguel Hidalgo was one of the most famous sparks in Mexico's independence movement, which started in 1810. Hidalgo was a parish priest in Dolores, Guanajuato. In 1809, he joined a group aimed at ridding Spain from the 300-year tyranny of Mexico. And on the 9th of September, early morning of September 16, Hidalgo carried the banner of the Virgen de Guadalupe and pronounced the now famous Grito de Dolores, which was the final spark for revolution. His army had initial success, but he was captured, defrocked, then tried and executed. Spain also put his head on display in Guanajuato. José María Morelos Pavón was also a priest and also fought in the War of Independence. On September 13, he convened the Congress Nacional Constitucional in Chapalcingo and proclaimed independence. After fighting many battles, he was captured in 1815 and killed by Spain. Galeana was a Mexican soldier. In 1810, he joined a pro-independence army in Morelos, carrying with him a little gun called El Niño. In 1811, he defeated loyalists in Tixla, captured Tasco, and entered Cuernavaca. In 1813, he fought bravely during the capture of Acapulco Castle, but later died in the Battle of Coyuca, Guerrero. Mariano Matamoros Iguridi was a liberal Mexican priest who joined Morelos in 1811, fighting for independence, fighting in important battles in Oaxaca and Tenacinco. He manufactured weapons and led troops. He was also captured and killed in the main square of Valladolid. Francisco Javier Mina was the general commander of Navarre during Mexico's independence war. He fought against the monarchy of Ferdinand VII. He recruited officers from Europe and the United States and landed at Soto La Mariana on April 15, 1817. He fought and earned many victories, but was also captured and shot. Guadalupe Victoria was the first president of the Republic in 1824, who also fought for independence under Morelos. He was opposed to Iturbide, Mexico's first emperor, backed the military revolution of Santa Anna in 1822. He ordered the abolition of slavery and the expulsion of the Spaniards, and solidified international relations with Great Britain, the United States, Central America, and Simón Bolívar's Gran Colombia. Nicolás Bravo was a supreme leader near the end of the Independence War, working with Morelos. He was captured and held prisoner for 3 years. He helped depose Iturbide on 2 occasions, and although briefly, he was president. In 1847, he defended Chapultepec Castle from the invading Americans and was later poisoned. Jose Mariano Jimenez settled in Guanajuato, joining Hidalgo with 3,000 men and fighting many battles. He was captured like many people before him, and he was shot with Allende in Aldama, and his head was also put on display by the Spanish. Juan Aldama was captain in the cavalry of Queen Isabel II at the start of the Independence War. He fought with Allende in many battles until both were captured and killed, and his head was severed and put on display. Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez was nicknamed La Corregidora, the female magistrate. She was married to the magistrate of Querétaro and backed independence as she was arrested. Vicente Guerrero was an insurgent leader in Morelos' army and joined the Plan de Ilagua in 1821. He fought in many battles and later tried to depose Iturbide. He was president for only months in 1829 and was shot in 1831. Mariano Abasolo was a Mexican soldier and fought with Allende and Aldama, and was even with Hidalgo and Allende on September 15th, 16th, the start of the Independence Wars. He was captured, but his life was saved due to his wealthy wife, but died in 1816 after sentenced to life in prison. Now this is the banner of the Three Guarantees, under which the triumphant Antigarante army entered Mexico City, achieving independence on September 27th, 1821. Leona Vicaria was a hero of the Mexican War of Independence. She used her personal fortune to manufacture weapons and led a postal service. She also paid for the welfare of captured freedom fighters. She was captured and tried in 1813, but was rescued from prison and continued to spread independence ideals with her husband, Quintana Roo. Born in Mérida, Andrés Quintana Roo was a member of Parliament in Puebla, who signed the Act of Independence in 1813. He drafted the Apatzingan Constitution. Later, he was a Supreme Court judge and helped define the borders within the U.S. and defeated the bid for Yucatan independence. Manuel Gómez Pedraza was a royalist soldier, but later became president of Mexico, but withdrew because of opposition. He was exiled until 1832. He returned after another presidential run that failed. He was a member of Iturbide's imperial household. Agustín Iturbide was a scion and resisted independence freedom fighters. In 1821, he convened the Plan de Iguala. After independence in 1821, he was crowned emperor, but his royal reign lasted only 10 months. He was exiled as a traitor he was, returned, and was shot. The next figures are more associated with the Mexican Revolution, but Rivera includes them here, so let's go ahead and talk about them now. José de León Toral is known for assassinating General Obregón. He was executed on February 9th. Concepción Acevedo de la Lata, better known as Mother Conchita, was tried for instigating Obregón's murder and imprisoned. Luis Morones was the leader of CROM, the Regional Confederation of Mexican Workers. With great political power, he became Minister of Industry in the Calles government and was exiled for following Calles. Álvaro Obregón fought against Villa and Zapata, but eventually changed sides. He was elected president between 1920 and 1924, helping to stabilize the country, disbanded most of the army, re-established international relations, and helped the economy. He created the Secretaría de Educación Pública, also known as the Ministry of Education. He was re-elected in 1928, but was assassinated before taking office. Plutarco Elias Calles was a general serving under President Carranza, later rebelling against him. He was Minister of the Interior during Obregón's administration and later elected President of Mexico between 1924 and 1928. During his role, he promoted agrarian reform, modernized the army, and constructed roadways. In 1926, he expelled all foreign clergy, closed the churches, and established rules for the church. The church was in uproar and helped foster an armed rebellion known as the Cristero Wars. He was later expelled, and his time in power is known as the Maximato. Felipe Carrillo Puerto was the governor of Yucatan, a progressive and known as the Apostle of the Mayan race. He founded the Southeast Socialist Party, and he was later shot during the De la Huerta Rebellion. Jose Guadalupe Rodriguez was an agrarian leader and socialist. He favored land distribution to the people. He knew Diego Rivera personally and was later assassinated during the wave of repression. Emiliano Zapata is one of the most famous figures of the Mexican Revolution and known as a Mexican agrarian revolutionary leader, especially in southern Mexico. Based in Morelos, his slogan was Tierra y Libertad, and he supported peasants. He supported the agrarian Ayala plan and was later betrayed and assassinated. The next section, the Revolution of 1910. Here, Rivera shows the church still holds immense power in national politics. Carmen Romero Rubio de Diaz was a daughter of Manuel Romeo Rubio and Agustina Castello. She was married at only 12 years old to General Porfirio Diaz, the dictator. General Porfirio Diaz is Mexico's most famous dictator, which lasted nearly 4 decades. Born in Oaxaca, he became president in 1877 until 1911. His corruption spawned the Mexican Revolution. He was anti-media, anti-democracy, he was a racist president. He attacked anyone who spoke out against him. He favored big business and foreigners and enacted laws that helped the elite but hurt most citizens. I'm glad the United States doesn't have a leader like that. Jose Yves Limantor was Minister of the Treasury during Diaz's presidency. During his tenure, many Mexicans starved. Victoriano Huerta was part of a group that assassinated Francisco Madero in the National Palace. He was Mexican president from February 1913 to July 1914, with typical Mexican oppression.
General Manuel Mondragon was opposed to Madero and collaborated with Huerta in the military uprising. Manuel Romero Rubio was exiled for his liberal ideals. He served as a judge and served with Benito Juarez and was Secretary of the Interior under the Diaz dictatorship. Ignacio Mariscal was a liberal Oaxacan lawyer. Mariscal served in the 3-Year War and served in Juarez's government. Carlos Pacheco was a liberal who fought against imperialism. He was the governor of Morelos, leader of the federal district, and minister of the trade and industry during the Porfiriato. Manuel González Cosillo served as Minister of Communications and Public Works, Minister of the Interior, Trade and Industry, and War, and the Navy during the Diaz dictatorship. Sostenes Rocha first opposed the Ayutla Plan, but later joined Juarez against French intervention. He was the director of the military school under Diaz, known for writing military books. Sebastián Lerdo de Tejada was interim president, started another political party, and was president in 1872. Justo Sierra was Minister of Education from 1905 to 1911, nicknamed Teacher of America. Gabino Barreda was a scientist and educator who collaborated with Benito Juarez in improving the country's educational system. He drew the plans for the National Preparatory School and directed it for 10 years. Guillermo Prieto saved Benito Juarez's life by standing in front of Juarez and rebel troops in Guadalajara. Esteban Vaca Calderón was a leader of the Cananeo strike. one of the last sparks that started the Mexican Revolution. He was imprisoned in San Juan de Ulua and later fought against Huerta. Camilo Arriaga was a defender of the reform laws during the Porfiriato, helped found the Ponciano Arriaga Liberal Club, was arrested with them, but found refuge in the United States with the Flores Magón brothers. Antonio Diaz Soto y Gama was a liberal lawyer, Zapatista supporter, defender of the Ayala Plan, and founded the National Agrarian Party. He was also a professor of agrarian law and Mexican history at UNAM, the University of Mexico. Felipe Angeles was a career soldier. He was also a Carranza dissident, but still served with him in the Constitutionalist Army. He also supported Pancho Villa, who named him delegate to the Convention of Aguascalientes. Emiliano Zapata is one of the most famous figures of the Mexican Revolution, known as the Mexican agrarian revolutionary leader, especially in southern Mexico. Based in Morelos, his slogan was Tierra y Libertad. Otilio Montaño was a teacher and one of Zapata's main advisors and generals. He's also credited with drafting the Ayala Plan. Like Zapata, he was killed during the revolution.
Juan Saravia was a lawyer and fought against Diaz under the Mexican Liberal Party. He worked with anti-re-electionist publications against Diaz and was supported by the Flores Magón brothers, and consequently imprisoned in San Juan de Ulua. He was also a senator for the Federalist District in Mexico City. Carmen Cerdán was a liberal woman who embraced the revolution. During the initial shooting in her house in Puebla, she was wounded and taken prisoner. She worked as a nurse during the revolution. Achille Cerdán worked against Diaz too, and after meeting Francisco Madero, offered to start the revolution in Puebla, which did happen. Once the Diaz dictatorship learned of the revolution, the federal government surrounded his house and he was killed in a firefight. General Pascual Orozco was also anti-Diaz and initially Madero's ally. Later, acting on his own account, he fought with Huerta and sacked León, Guanajuato. José Garibaldi was an Italian lieutenant colonel that arrived in Mexico in 1911 and fought alongside Madero and took part in the attack on Casa Grandes, Chihuahua. Pancho Villa. His real name was Torterio Arango. He was probably the most famous revolutionary leader in the North, and for a brief time he fought alongside Zapata and against Carranza, and like Zapata, he was assassinated. Juan Sanchez Azcona was an anti-re-electionist journalist and close collaborator of Madero, and had several government positions with Carranza and Huerta. General Lucio Blanco fought under Carranza and Obregón in Tamaulipas. He carried out the 1st Division of land in northern Mexico and was in the Convention of Aguascalientes. He was later assassinated. José María Pino Suárez was vice president under Madero and was assassinated with Madero on the orders of Victoriano Huerta and Ángeles Félix during the 10 tragic days. Francisco Madero was jailed by President Diaz and later called for the revolution to begin on November 20th, 1910. He then exiled Diaz and became President of Mexico. Madero was assassinated by orders of Huerta, who betrayed him. Abraham Gonzalez, with Madero, was the co-founder of the anti-re-electionist party and was Minister of the Interior during Madero's rule. He was later assassinated. Manuel de Iguez was a worker in the Cananea Consolidated Copper Company. He helped organize the Union Liberal Humanidad and the famous strike on June 1906. He was jailed in San Juan de Ulua and freed by revolutionaries in 1911. He was eventually shot for being anti-Huerta. José Guadalupe Posada was one of the greatest Mexican artists that ever lived. He was probably most famous as an engraver and lithographs, which were printed on countless publications. His images really defined the era. He was probably most famous for his skulls
La Catrina, which are still incredibly famous today, and you can see them in Dia de los Muertos celebrations. José Vasconcelos was the Minister of Public Education from 1921 to 24 and was probably most famous for his essay La Raza Cósmica and for the mural program that covered the country in amazing murals from artists like Diego Rivera, Siqueiros, and Orozco. Ricardo Flores Magón was pro-democracy and co-founded the newspaper Regeneración. Due to his pro-democracy and anti-Diaz dictatorship, he was attacked and fled to the United States, where he continued to write. Venustiano Carranza was president and successor to Huerta, known as the first leader of the Constitutionalist Army. Pancho Villa and Zapata were originally on his side, but later became his main adversary. He was called a traitor to the revolution. Luis Cabrera was the Minister of the Treasury under Carranza and defended agrarian rights and influenced the Constitution, especially Article 27, land reform and land distribution. The second to the last section moving leftward is French intervention. And here are the forts of Loreto y Guadalupe, the bastions of the defense of Puebla, and also the scene of the Mexican victory over Napoleon III's army in 1862. Now the eagle represents the Habsburgs, which is also flying towards Europe after the execution of Maximilian. Tomás Mejia was a soldier who defended the country during the United States invasion. He was executed with the Habsburgs, Maximilian, and General Miramón on the Cerro de las Campanas. Maximilian of the House of the Habsburgs was an Austrian archduke whom the Mexican conservatives asked to reign over Mexico, while Benito Juárez was the constitutional president. He moved to Mexico and established himself as emperor. When France withdrew its military support, he was captured and shot on the Cerro de las Campanas, along with his generals Miguel Miramón and Tomás Mejia. Mariano Escobedo fought against the U.S. invasion. In 1854, he defended the Ayutla Plan, which eventually ended the Santa Anna dictatorship. And here's Benito Juárez, again, the first indigenous president of Mexico, who worked to restore order to Mexico during internal divisions and foreign invaders. Ignacio Zaragoza was the Minister of War and the Navy under Juárez. As a commander-in-chief of the Army of the East, he led the defense of Puebla, winning the battle on Cinco de Mayo in 1862. He died 4 months later in Mexico City. Miguel Negrete Novoa was a distinguished Mexican officer during the war with France. He defended Loreto during the Cinco de Mayo battle against the French. And here is the last section, Mexico Today and Tomorrow, painted in 1934, which takes up 132.8 meters. Near the center, Rivera paints a police force protecting the interests of the rich and elite, attacking the people they are sworn to protect who are engaging in peaceful protests. Here you see the golden shirts aggressors, purportedly anti-communist and a symbol of the reactionary right wing, a member of the Catholic organization, the Knights of Columbus, wearing the cross of Maquis. Rivera was a well-known communist. And to the far right, conservative police murder poor people who want change. At the bottom, Mexican peasants are reaping wheat. They are exploited by landowners, and you also see the exploited industrial workers, who Rivera uses to show the oppression of the people by the corrupt Mexican elite. Here is his wife, Frida Kahlo, and her sister, Cristina Kahlo. They're portrayed as socialist educators. To Frida's left, you see a money-making machine under the altar of the Virgen de Guadalupe. An exploitive friar, a peasant, and the idiotic bourgeoisie. These all contributed to the immense power and riches of the church. On either side of the Virgen Guadalupe image hang several flags, including the United States flag and the flag of Christ the King. To the left is an image of corrupt clergy having sexual sins with a female congregate. Just above are images of United States bourgeoisie. From left to right, John D. Rockefeller Jr., Harry Sinclair, William Durand, John Pierpont Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and Andrew Mellon. And here, army officers, fat capitalists, and ecclesiastics, which are represented by politicians including Calles, Morones, Ortiz Rubio, Abelardo Rodriguez, and corrupt members of the clergy. They have grown rich by exploiting the masses. Here are exploited workers and laborers. Now just above is Fernando Ocaranzo Carmano, the former rector of the National University, teaching students the doctrines of Mexican socialism. Far left, the images represent the two facets of public education: the people, represented by students at the Workers' University with Marx's Das Kapital under their arms, and the education of the ruling classes. Near the top, but positioned near the center, a strong Mexican worker haranguing the masses under the Soviet flag. You also see soldiers with gas masks and the city of Mexico in flames during the Proletariat Revolution. On top is Karl Marx, with a caption from his Communist Manifesto, showing the revolutionary trinity: soldier, laborer, and peasant. The new progressive society that will result from Mexico's socialist revolution, founded on industry, agriculture, and science. To his left, Marx points to the proletariat struggle and the utopia of a socialist and just future. And there we have it, Diego Rivera's epic masterpiece, The History of Mexico, which covers more than 2,000 years and details more than 230 historical figures and historical events within these 554 meters at the National Palace. It's one of the greatest historical murals ever. Thanks so much for watching. Viva Mexico!